if you have any ideas of these chapters. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الخلق وسيد المرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So mashallah, nice to be here with you all on this Friday night. Thank you for making time for an important subject. And subhanAllah, you have to be someone who's serious about learning to be here on a Friday night to be ready to talk about what we're going to be talking about tonight, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, many thanks to our dear Mufti Ibrahim for organizing this. He's the one who asked me to come and speak about this subject in particular, and that is a testament to his foresight and understanding for the needs of the community. And tonight we're talking about specifically about suicide prevention. Let me just introduce myself very briefly and so give some context to why we're talking about what we're talking about tonight, inshallah. My name is Suhail Mullah. I am the director at the Khalil Center, which is the nation's largest Muslim mental health agency or organization. We serve. We were founded to specifically serve the mental health needs of the Muslim community. We use an Islamically integrated approach in the work that we do. We are very conscious and understanding that mental health is stigmatized in the Muslim community, and we do every effort that we can to bridge that gap. Our leadership are people who are trained in Sharia, and they're also trained in one of the various mental health fields, either in psychology, in social work like myself, or in marriage family therapy, etc. And we have psychiatrists on board as well. So this office in the Valley was started about almost 3 years now. And alhamdulillah, we've gotten very, very busy in the last year in particular. In the last 6 months alone, we've seen 1,000 we've had 1,000 different appointments. We have 8 people on staff now. Actually, it's going to be 9 next week. We have 7 therapists. All of them are practicing Muslim therapists who incorporate understandings of the Deen into their work with the community members that we work with. We work with Muslims. Our physical location is here. Our physical location is here in Northridge, but we do, of course, during the pandemic, a lot of work virtually. So we see clients throughout Greater LA primarily, also throughout Southern California, and then to a greater extent in California. And we do also have clients that are national for some of the work that we do. So, and by the way, just to give you some scope of what we do, and I'm sharing this context for you because I want you to understand this is a real issue in the community. This is a reality. Mental health and mental disorders, people who suffer from depression, people who have anxiety, people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, people who have schizophrenia, people who have bipolar disorder, people who are suicidal. In our intakes, we found that 1 out of 3 people that we serve have contemplated suicide. 1 out of 3 people that come to our office have contemplated suicide. A smaller number, much smaller number than that have actually attempted. But the reality is that many people have gotten to points in their life where they feel it's not worth living anymore. And oftentimes these sort of things in the Muslim community are discounted or are thrown off or brushed off as things that are related to somebody has a lack of iman, somebody doesn't pray enough, somebody doesn't make dua, somebody doesn't, something is not right with their Islam, and that's why they're in the state of being that they are. I was sharing with Mufti Ibrahim earlier that, he shared an article with me from earlier this year, I believe. It was about an imam in India, in Gujarat, India, who took his own life, who committed suicide, who died by suicide. And how that is an active reality in that part of the Muslim world, where many Muslims are taking their lives. That's in India, a place where there's very little resource, very little attention paid to mental health, especially in the Muslim community. Alhamdulillah, we are in America where we have, similarly, we face great challenges. Individuals face incredible struggles as far as maintaining a positive mental health. And alhamdulillah, here we have resources, and that's this is that is the context in which we're here today, providing a resource, providing some understanding, shedding some light on a very, very important topic. My background is in social work, and I'm also trained in the Sharia. So today we're talking about specifically, and I apologize for this screen. I'm not sure what to do, quite honestly. This is not my field. I'm in related matters. We have plenty of ground student brothers here that I'm sure have some. Yes, please, by all means. So we are talking about suicide prevention, the Muslim community's responsibility. The subject of mental health is a huge subject. It's by no means a topic that we can talk about in 1 or 2 hours. There are multiple topics. We have multiple presentations related on so many different issues that we could really address as it relates to this issue. But Mufti Saab asked us specifically to talk about suicide today. I'll share a couple of things that have happened to me just in this past week, just to give you some context of how active a reality this is in the work that we do at Khalil Center. We got some devastating news just a couple of weeks ago about a very well-reputed individual in the bigger community, and I can't give specifics here for the purpose of maintaining people's identity, confidentiality, and privacy, and so forth. Who literally, and I can't even share with you the means by which they were going to take their life, but they were sitting with full capability, the full means to take their own life. This is a person who is very well reputed in the Muslim community, in Muslim leadership, in Muslim religious leadership, and they were on the verge of taking their own life. There were some brothers who intervened, and alhamdulillah, now that individual is getting help and so on and so forth. But that could have been easily a very devastating reality in the community. But that's not to say that that doesn't happen in the Muslim community. And I don't know what I'm at liberty to share here in terms of things that have happened in our own community. But this is something that has afflicted us in our own local community, where we have lost members of our community to suicide. I used to be the imam at the Islamic Center, at the Islamic Society of Orange County in Garden Grove, and over there they have the largest mortuary in Southern California. Probably in California, serving the Muslim community. There's about 20 funerals a month that they do through that mortuary. And every month there's a couple of young people that die. The narrative is that this young person died by in their sleep. They took some sort of medication, and it interacted with their body, and physically things went wrong, or other reasons as such are given. The funeral director there at the mortuary told me that 8 out of 10 of the young people that died, and when I say young people, I'm talking about in their teens and up to the age of 30 years old or so, are people who die by suicide. But yet the families don't divulge, they don't relay that information to the community because of the shame, the guilt, the stigma that is attached to that. We get to look at the colorful birds for the whole time. And I knew that from experience. That when we would visit the families of the young people in the community, males and females that had died, it was always very obvious that there was some, there was other circumstances around their death. So suicide is an active reality in our community. It's just not talked about, which is a shame, because if we were able to more freely and openly express what was happening in the community, it would lead to more awareness, which would lead to more people coming forward with their problems, which would lead to it being normalized in our community, which means people who need the help would get the help they would receive without the artificial barriers that are there as it relates to this issue. So, as we're trying to get the PowerPoint up, I'm presenting this today, the subject matter in the context of, we're talking about suicide prevention. And, you are all aware of this ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us the value of life. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. A long ayah, but the part that is essential to us here is that whoever saves a life, whoever saves a soul, it is as if they have saved all of humanity, right? And so if we're talking about suicide prevention, what are we talking about other than how to save lives? How to save lives of people's lives who are jeopardized for whatever the reason may be, right? And so this is an imperative upon the Muslim community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us the incredible reward that is attached to this. Now, again, I wish you could see it, but there was a report that just recently came out. It's by an organization called the JAMA Psychiatry Organization. It was a survey that was done of hundreds of Muslim and other faith individuals across America. It was just published this past July, and their findings were, and it was done by Muslims. It was conducted by top psychiatrists and psychologists in the field, and they found very disturbing findings in that survey, where they found that U.S. Muslim adults were 2 times more likely. U.S. Muslim adults were 2 times more likely to report a history of suicide attempt compared with respondents from other faith traditions. Listen to that. We like to think as Muslims that we are, we have some sort of great protective, factor because of simply the fact that we're Muslims, and that is enough. And that is enough of a deterrent for us not to take our lives, because we know in Islam it's haram for somebody to take their life. And so most Muslims know that, and therefore, why would that be an issue? Right? There's a lot of things that are haram in this deen that people do, that Muslims do day in, day out, The issue is not a matter of something being haram or not. The issue is a matter of approaching the problem in the community and finding solutions to deal with it based upon how we see these matters as Muslims. So it becomes a responsibility upon us as a community, especially when we see stark numbers like this. Muslim adults are 2 times more likely to report the history of suicide attempt compared with people from other religions. And that is a very scary number. And what does that mean? That means that Muslims have the same stresses that other people have in this world, and on top of that, there are other things that are specific to Muslims that other people don't face. So, for example, in America, Islamophobia is a great stressor upon the Muslim community collectively. And there's still people who are afraid to come to the masjid or who allow their youth to participate in Muslim youth groups and these different things. I hear this phrase all the time that they'll say about some family member that this person is too religious or all of these things, because they are afraid of how the external community is viewing us as Muslims, and that impacts us greatly. And there are young Muslims in schools who are bullied because of their faith. Unfortunately, we're seeing what's happening now with the Taliban in Afghanistan. We're seeing what's happening now in Afghanistan, and that is those images on the TV screen that people associate with Islam, although they have much of what you see that has nothing to do with Islam, affects us here because of how the greater community sees Muslims in America, and that impacts us, and so on and so forth. So those stressors are there and they're real. Now, again, you can't see the numbers, but the statistics show that in the year 2018, there are almost 50,000 people in America who took their own lives, right? And if you are to look at percentage-wise, right? What does that mean? Muslims are what? 1% of the U.S. population, approximately, right? 1 to 1.5% of the U.S. population. So 1% of 50,000 is what? Assuming that those numbers apply across the board, which perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. It's hard to say, but that means that there are hundreds of Muslims dying, perhaps every year in the United States due to suicide. And again, I don't want to highlight specific cases and specific instances that have happened in communities, but these people are taking their lives across the globe. People in Muslim leadership, imams, are well aware of this, and they deal with families and they do the pastoral care that they do for families. That these things are happening. And what's difficult about understanding this, and by the way, they say that there's 132 people who take their life by suicide every day in the US, right? 1 suicide every 11 minutes. What's important to understand about this is the number of lives that are impacted by that. I'm sorry you can't see the screens, so just follow with me a little bit. They're related to every single suicide. There are 115 people who are exposed to that on average, meaning, in that person's community, in that person's lives, there are 100 other people, 115 other people on average that lives are impacted by that person taking their life. 53 of those people, there's some short-term life disruption. In other words, if you know somebody close to you, fairly close to you, has taken their life, that's going to impact you in some way. 25 of those people, there's a major life disruption. In other words, it's going to impact their work, it's going to impact their household. It's going to potentially, they're going to, the survivors I'm talking about, who are left behind, they are potentially going to face their own mental health challenges. People will go into a short-term depression or the like because of somebody else who died. And 11 of those people, it has devastating effects on their lives. You're talking about the immediate family members, the mother, the father, the siblings, the children. And so if you take those numbers, over 1 million people, so if you say 11 people have devastating effects on their life, and 25 people's lives are majorly affected by when somebody else commits suicide, you take those numbers and you multiply it by the 50,000 people who lose their life every year. That's 1 million people in the US whose lives are heavily impacted by suicide. You follow the chain and how it goes out. So we have some suicide myths and facts that I just wanted to kind of quickly share with you or ask you as to what you think these things look like. So I'll say the statement and you tell me, is this fact or myth? No one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable. Fact or myth? Myth. And that's why we're doing this, what we're doing today, right? We all have the ability to play a role in preventing suicide, and specifically if we know somebody who who has what we call suicidal ideation, but thinking about it, that is the best time to intervene, right? There's nothing that says that person is going to go through with that, although that is why we're here today, to learn some preventative techniques. Another myth or fact: confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Myth or fact? Myth. If you are to confront a person about suicide, you know somebody is thinking about taking their life, you heard something, you saw something that indicates, addressing that with them is not going to increase the risk of suicide. Some people say, well, I'm afraid to talk to that person because of what that might mean, right? Am I putting the idea of suicide in their mind, even if they never said that they're thinking about taking their own life or something like that? No, the research shows that talking to somebody does not increase the risk, and in fact, it has the potential of decreasing the risk if you take that conversation to the next logical steps. Only experts can prevent suicide. Myth or fact? Myth. Everybody has the ability, everyday people, to intervene with people in their lives, their loved ones, their friends, and so on and so forth. It doesn't take an expert to prevent suicide. Yes, there are mental health experts who work with people who who struggle with suicidal ideation over a long period of time. Right? I have one of my clients at the Fadil Center is a brother who has been struggling with suicide, who actually attempted to take his life twice by very violent means. Beautiful, practicing Muslim brother, and he lives and breathes Islam, right? But yet he tried twice to take his own life, and he told me something to the effect of a few months ago. He said, "I'm going to give myself 6 months. In other words, 6 months to get better, to get to a place where I don't feel like that is an out for me, and then I'm going to make a decision." My work with him over time. Don't be naive and think that telling someone, look, brother, committing suicide in haram is committing suicide in Islam is haram. For some people, that's a preventative enough measure. We work with some people who are depressed, who have some severe problems in their life, and we ask them that question: have you thought of taking your life before? It's a standard question we ask as we go to learn, and they'll tell you, no, alhamdulillah. My life problems are very bad, and going through a very difficult time and my life is horrible, but I would never do that. Right? Many Muslims will tell you that, who are even seeking therapy and so on and so forth. But there are others who that's not the case. Right? That's not the case. And so, anyways, this brother that I was telling you about, my goal with him was to work with erasing suicide as an option for him. And alhamdulillah, after working with him for a period of time, we got to the point where now he says, Sheikh, I've taken that off the table. And that has given him the ability to now focus on life, because he's now no longer focusing on death. Right? That's all, it was an option. And so we work on what we call harm reduction to take that away as an option. Let's see. Another question for you. Suicidal people who are thinking of committing suicide keep their plans to themselves. Fact or myth? The majority of people who are contemplating suicide do not keep their plans to themselves. There are indicators, many indicators in their life. If the people around them are only able to, if they were to understand what they were going through, and they were to understand some simple signs, they would understand those are signs, right? Or sometimes they're very overt signs, like saying, life is not worth living anymore. The direct statement that somebody's saying that, life is not worth living anymore. Well, what's between that and I'm going to take my own life? Very little, right? So there's oftentimes, or most of the time, people who are thinking of taking their own lives, there are very blatant and even explicit indicators that they are at that point. Let's see. So before we talk about, how do we deal with suicide, and how do we deal with individuals who are contemplating suicide, etc., who commits suicide, right? Who commits suicide? What type of mental illnesses do people deal with that take them down this path? Now, we find that one of the most common disorders that people have that engage in suicide are people who suffer from what's called bipolar disorder. You all have heard of bipolar disorder? What does bipolar disorder mean? In a simple way, extreme highs and extreme lows, right? That they will become extremely manic, meaning they can become very happy and accomplish. There are periods of time. This can be a few hours. This can be a few days, a few weeks, where a person will become very active. They can accomplish a lot, do a lot, very hyper in their activity, and they can accomplish a lot, do a lot of positive things, and then they'll fall into a low. That low can be a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, where they'll fall into an extreme depression, right? And their life is between these 2 points for years and years and years, sometimes people for their whole lives, right? Because of various chemical imbalances that may be there within the individual, not something that they brought upon themselves by their own hands, not because of their own doing, because it is their test, if you will, that they have, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed within them. So bipolar disorder often goes undiagnosed, untreated, and it sometimes results in one of a person's out for life is to take their own life, and that happens frequently with individuals who have bipolar disorder that goes untreated. Depression is another high risk group for suicide. Depression is essentially what? Life is not worth living anymore, and life is so bad. There is no hope, and there's not much that lies for some people between that and taking their own life. As far as some of the numbers, 25, these are heavy numbers, 25 to 50% of people with bipolar disorder attempt suicide. 25, 1/4 to 1/2 of people who have bipolar disorder attempt suicide. 1 in 5 people with this illness die by suicide. In other words, out of this whole group of people, those that die with bipolar, 1 out of 5, they leave this world because they take their own life. Right? So it's a heavy thing. It's not subhanAllah. It's that should elicit within the heart of the mu'min rahmah, mercy, right? Unfortunately, as Muslims, oftentimes we look at people who take their own lives, or people who are thinking about taking their own lives with the eye of disdain and of like, how could they do that? What horrible thing? Why would they? And looking at them as they're a horrible or a bad person. That's not how our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with the world. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is this man who showed tremendous mercy to everyone around him, including those who lived with him. And we can go on and on about the condition of people during the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, and people who faced various mental illnesses. That's a topic for another day. As we said earlier, most people communicate their intent before an attempt, right? Most people communicate the fact that they're thinking of committing suicide before they actually attempt suicide. Let's see. And this is interesting. Suicide attempts typically occur very soon after the onset of the illness. In other words, when people who have bipolar disorder or some people with depression, suicide attempts will happen early on. So in other words, the early we are able to get people to help, right, the appropriate professional help to deal with their depression, to deal with the various other mental illnesses, the more likely we are able to curtail them from engaging or attempting or having ideas about taking their own. All right. So what are some of the clues and warning signs of suicide that we should look for? Number one, the more clues and signs that we see, the greater the risk. Like the more things that you see that are troubling about an individual, the greater the risk for that person to commit suicide. So we take all signs seriously. Anything that you see, it should be something that's taken seriously. So there are some direct verbal cues that people will make, right? Some direct statements that people will make. For example, we hear these statements made by people in the work that we do. Someone will say, for example, I've decided to kill myself. They are telling you very directly what they are intending to do. It's not something to be minimized. It's not something that's, oh, he's just talking. He's always been off. And he always says things that are strange and weird and off, and he's just talking. That is a heavy sign when you hear something like that. If somebody says, I wish I were dead, right? I wish I were dead, they are saying very explicitly about where they would want to be, right? Somebody who says, I'm going to commit suicide. Somebody says, I'm going to end it all. Somebody says, if such and such doesn't happen, then I'll kill myself. Direct statements, right? That should not be blown off at all. Those are things that people say. What about behaviors that you may see? Clues, right? Signs. Number one, if anybody has previously attempted suicide, that is automatically a cause for concern when you see certain things going wrong in that person's life and you see them in a certain state, that should be a point of concern, right? If somebody's done it before, they are more likely than others to do it again. Somebody acquiring the means by which to kill themselves. So somebody acquiring, there was a case recently where the person, they had acquired a gun, and it was found out that that was the reason why, because they were depressed and they wanted the actual means to take their life and to leave this world. Or they stockpile pills, they get their hands on certain pills. or if they start asking questions about what if someone does this, then what happens? And we start, you see those kind of things. If you see in someone extreme hopelessness, right? If you see in someone extreme hopelessness, the loss of hope is ultimately is the reason why a person takes their own life, right? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Right? Do not despair from the mercy of Allah. And this is addressed to people who commit grave sins, right? People who do certain things and they feel so guilty and they feel, how can I live anymore? And we see that. We have seen people in the community who have, unfortunately, practicing Muslims, who have fell to infidelity. In other words, they cheated on their spouse found out, their other people know, and they feel so ashamed, life is not worth living anymore, and there's no hope. I've ruined myself, I've ruined my reputation, now I want to leave this world. Right? Another clue, if you see a person who's just depressed and they start putting all their affairs in order now, meaning, starting to give everybody their rights. If they owe somebody a certain thing, owe somebody else a certain something else, it's also an indication, right, about what they are maybe planning to do next. They give away their prized possessions. Somebody has things that are very valuable to them, they just start giving them away. Somebody who has another sign is somebody who has sudden interest or sudden disinterest in religion. Either they've got very religious all of a sudden, or they've left everything. They left Salah all of a sudden. And we've seen that in people. We just got a call today of someone who somebody in their family was having extreme delusions that they are this is a female. She is the wife of the Mahdi, and she is going to go to Turkey and then go from there to Damascus, Syria, because that's where Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is going to come to. Having extreme delusions. This is a mental health condition. It's not a jinn position, it's issue. It's a mental health condition. Extreme psychological delusions. Along with that, auditory delusions, hearing voices, and some other people, they see things. The reason why I share that, we lost a young person in the greater LA community a few years ago. That person, he thought he was the Mahdi. And we tried to reason with him as to, why you are not. These are the signs of what the Mahdi is. And that young man, he took his life. He took his life because no one was able to reach him, and no one understood what was going on with him, and unfortunately, he took his life. People laugh about these things. There's a famous video of Dr. Zakir Naik when he's up on the stage, and then some guy comes on the microphone and he says, I'm the Mahdi. That guy had some serious mental health condition. People laugh at that and make fun of it and stuff. Those are things not to be laughed at. Those are things to be extremely concerned about. Because now that guy is laughed off. Where is he going to go now? Who's he going to talk to now, right? We have to take these things seriously in the community. When we see sudden interest or disinterest in the religion, and so on, there are other signs. Other sort of situational signs that we should look for is if somebody has lost a major relationship, somebody who is already extremely depressed, and now they lost, say, for example, their father and mother, which was their only support left in this world. For example, we hear that from people. Or the death of somebody else very, very close to them. One of the things that happens, unfortunately, we see in the school system a lot, and the schools are they're getting better about dealing with suicide, and the reason why they have to is because when there is one suicide in a school, suicide in some sense is contagious. In other words, some people will see that person who took their life and they say that person found a way out of their misery, out of their pain, out of their suffering. And I am also in misery and pain and in suffering. And why don't I do the same thing? So that is also, unfortunately, something that we see. There's a word for, like, I can't remember, but it's something like chain suicide or something. When one person takes their life, and then other people in that same immediate community, the same thing will happen. So it's very important when we see that happen in the Muslim community, we don't disregard it, right? It actually needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed because if it happens in this community, for example, there will other young people in the community know that will happen, and they're undoubtedly, I know for an absolute 100% fact, because these are the people that we help at the Khalil Center that are coming, that are depressed, that are suffering from various things, and they may take, unfortunately, an example for that, from that. And there are other sort of clues to also pay attention to. Very quickly, just want to share with you how do we help, right? What are the steps that we can take to help? And by the way, some of this information, a good portion of this information I took from a dear sister in the community, Sister Yasmin Irfani. For those of some of you may know her, she's a wonderful young lady doing good work in the community in the field of mental health. She works for the organization that's called NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness. And so she gave me permission to use some of this information. So there's a very kind of one of the main methods that is promoted in the field of suicide prevention is what they call QPR: question, persuade, and refer. Very easy for anybody to take and apply this to people that they may know in their life. How do we help? Question, persuade, and refer. And we'll go through it really quickly. So first, like I said earlier, we should ask the question. If you see somebody who's struggling, if it's one of your children, I experienced this too, with people very close in my life during the pandemic. During the pandemic, the anxiety shot up like sky high, right? And many other relationship issues, came about in the community, and so many other problems, because of their normal life stresses, and then the stress of the pandemic. The stress of the pandemic, there is this uncertainty that people have very low, what we call low uncertainty tolerance. Right? Even though as Muslims we have this concept of tawakkul, but people have a very difficult time with uncertainty, not knowing how to deal with that. And then people's loss of jobs, loss of social life, loss of school, loss of the ability to connect with other people, tremendously impacted people. So even in my own life, these are statements that I heard from people who are loved ones. I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live anymore. And so when you hear that, then you ask the question, that person should be talked to. It should not be just discounted as if it's just being said. People say, oh, they're just saying that to get attention. That's nonsense. That's nonsense to say when somebody says something that is heavy, that as such, they're just saying that to get attention. No, they're saying that out of pain, out of agony, out of suffering, something is going on within them. And to understand that pain and to try to connect with them, that's where we should start. So if we are ever in doubt with anybody that we know, we shouldn't hesitate, we should ask the question. If the person is reluctant to talk to us, we should be persistent in talking to them. We should talk to that person alone in a private setting. We know this is general Islamic etiquette, right? When you talk to somebody about a sensitive issue, you talk to them alone. You don't talk to them in a group and shame them in a group. We should allow a person to talk freely Oftentimes what happens in our families, because we don't understand these things, when somebody will, when these topics come up and a family doesn't know how to address them, they will shut them down. No, beta, you should just pray more. You should turn to Allah. Allah will help you. You have to have more trust in Allah. Yes, those are potentially means of getting some perspective, but to shut them down, to not give them space to express themselves emotionally, and just to give them a list of things to do, is not the way in which we deal with people and help them in these sort of situations. We give them the platform to talk, right, and not to lecture them. Let's see, what else? There's a less direct approach that you can take. Right? You can take a direct approach. You can take a less direct approach. Less direct approach. The questions, they look like asking, have you been unhappy lately? Have you been so unhappy lately that you have thought about maybe not living anymore? Right? By the way, this phrase of life, I would rather not be in this world anymore. That statement is there in the Quran. Who said it? Huh? Who said that statement in the Quran? I'm sorry? The mother of Isa alayhi salam, Sayyidatuna Maryam alayhi salam. وَكُنْتُ نَسْيًا مَنْسِيًّا. Right? She says, يَا لَيْتَنِي مِتُّ قَبْلَ هَذَا. I wish that I had died before this, and that I was just nothing, I was forgotten. Right? After she delivers Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, what is she expressing? She's expressing an extreme level of uncomfort, an extreme level of distress because of what she's going to be accused of, right? So if those words come on the tongue of Sayyidatuna Maryam alayhi salam, is that a statement of kufr? Is that a statement of, somebody's distrust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, that's a statement of somebody's, absolute, feeling of despair and of, that things, an expression of things are so bad, right? And that should be explored when we hear that with somebody. Say that to Maryam alayhi salam is Sayyidatul Nisa. She is the best of all women. She's not going to do anything beyond that. There's a statement that she made, but there's other people who will say that, and there's something maybe more that behind that needs to be explored. You can even ask a lighter question. Do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Again, that's a way for them to express that. Let's see. And then to ask a person the question directly, there is no problem with that. The experts say, even if you ask a person, are you thinking about killing yourself? You're going to get the most direct answer from there. That can be a very informative answer. So don't be afraid to ask that if you ever come across somebody in that sort of circumstance. How not to ask the question is to say somebody, to say to somebody, for example, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Right? How insensitive is that, right? You are, why is that a problematic statement? You are not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Exactly. You're already showing them that if they say yes, then you're going to judge them. You place judgment on it, right? You place judgment on that. You shamed them before you even talk to them, right? You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? Right? You place the judgment on it. And what if they are thinking of doing something what you think in your mind is stupid? Are they going to open up to you? No way, because you're calling them stupid, or you're calling what they're thinking about being stupid, right? Don't place judgment on it. Suicide is a dumb idea. Surely you're not thinking about suicide. What kid in their right mind is going to talk to their mom or dad after their mom or dad tells them that statement, right? What kid in their right mind is going to go to somebody who's close to them in their family after they just discount them like that? It's not about the thought, it's about the pain, right? Explore with them the pain, right? Be able to at least connect it. If you can't understand why somebody is thinking of taking their own life, and that you can't, that does seem dumb or something like that to you, and you don't understand that, and you don't talk about that. Understand that that person is in pain, right? And at least try to extract from that, but don't try to, we have, Desi and Arab fathers have a very, have a very difficult time listening to their children and emotionally understanding their children, and not just pouring on them advice, telling them what to do. This is what you should do. And if you do this, your life will be incredible, mashallah. Like they have the answer for everything. Listen to your children, understand your children, know what their needs are, know what they want. Don't dictate to them, and don't ask, don't engage in them in these sensitive questions, with these sensitive matters in this way. So those are the questions, right? Then we said persuade. So we're not going to be, let's say somebody, yes, I am thinking of, I don't want to live anymore. Right? So then what? So the next step is to persuade, right? Listen to the problem and give them your full attention. Listen to what's going on with them and give them your full attention. Listen, that's it. You don't have to do anything more. Listen to them. That's it. There's nothing more. You can give examples from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was the time when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one time Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was at some gathering. And at that gathering, there was 11 different women who shared about their husbands and what was going on in their lives. This hadith called Zara, famous hadith. And Sayyidatina Aisha, she comes home and she tells the Prophet ﷺ about all of those issues, and the Prophet ﷺ listens. Imagine, she's saying this person, this. The Prophet ﷺ just there listening, not passing judgment, not right. He was an incredible listener. When the Prophet ﷺ, when he would talk to people, he would, number one, not interrupt them, right? Even with the kuffar, even with the people who, came at him very, evilly and vehemently, just said all of these nasty things to him. There's one incident that's related with, he was Walid ibn Mughira, and he's saying these things to the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he waits, and then he asks him at the end, are you finished? And then he says to him, he didn't interrupt him, even though he's saying nasty things. Let alone with the believers, the Prophet ﷺ, he sits and he turns his whole body. If there's somebody standing here, he doesn't look at him. He turns his whole body and faces them, right? That's how you give your full attention. So anyways, persuading a person looks like also don't rush to judgment, right? Don't rush to judgment. So the person says, I'm thinking, you're doing what? You're no way, not in my house. That's not going to happen. Just listen. Don't shut somebody down when they're about to emotionally open up. Don't shut them down. When or how are they going to open up to you? Why would they open up to you? Right? This is a bad, unfortunate habit that a lot of our families, we don't have the sensibility to understand when somebody in our family expresses pain. And even if they're doing something wrong, but they're willing to open up and emotionally express themselves, just sit and listen. Don't rush to judgment. And offer hope in any form, right? Hope in any form. You have this to live for that. You have this to live for. You have that to live for. You have this to live for. You have that to live for. Opening their eyes to certain things. Alhamdulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this and this. But don't tell people, we have people do this oftentimes. in the community. Their son or daughter is depressed. Alhamdulillah, most of our community lives, maybe maybe they live in middle class homes, maybe in upper middle class homes, maybe even they're wealthy. But let's say their 18-year-old daughter is depressed, right? There's nothing wrong. It's a good family. There's no family problems. Mother and father are together. And then they tell their daughter, and say, what are you depressed for? We have everything. We have food. We have, everything you need. You go to the best school. You got the best this and that. Look at those people in Afghanistan. Look at those people in Pakistan. That's where you lost them. What did you do? You, number one, you discounted her feelings. And number two, those are other people. She's telling you about herself. Why are you telling her about other people and comparing her to other people, right? But to say, so that's, we have to be very careful, right? Look at the language. It's different. One thing to say, alhamdulillah, that, Allah has given you a beautiful child. It's a father who's thinking of taking his life. And what a beautiful gift Allah has given you. And he needs his father to grow up. Actually, that's a dialogue we had to have with one of the brothers in the community not too long ago, who was thinking of taking his own life. You have a child, and you have to take, who's going to take care of them? Who's going to, but that's different than telling them, look, man, you have everything in the world. What more do you want? You have a good job, you have this, that's not the way to do it. You see what I'm saying, how to approach it. Persuade them also looks like, will you go with me to get help, right? So you're holding them to something else. Will you go with me to get help? Will you let me help you get help, right? Now you understand that you're not a psychologist, you're not a psychotherapist. You may not have the tools to understand their depression on a deeper level, but you can persuade them to get to the right place, right? And your willingness to listen to them can instill hope once again in them, and can make all the difference in the world. Right? It's that one intervention that saved that person. And then the last part is to refer them, right? You question them, you ask them, you have to open up the dialogue. Then there's a little bit of persuasion, right? And then refer them to the right resources, right? So when people are suicidal, they are in a state of utter hopelessness and despair, and they feel they can't be helped. So it does take some work, right? You don't leave them at that time. The best referral, the best thing that you can do to them is take them to wherever they need to go to get help. Bring them, call us at Khalil Center. Bring them with you to, stand by them all the way through until they get to a place where they can actually get the next level of care, right? If you're not able to do that for whatever reason, try to get a commitment from them to accept help. I understand that things are really bad, and thank you for opening up with me and sharing with me. And, I would love to be here to support you in the best that I can. Can I get an agreement from you today that you are going to get help to deal with what you're dealing with in life, right? And then try to make arrangements to help them. But get that little bit of commitment. That can mean a lot. Commitments mean a lot. And then the last step, if you're not able to do that, is to at least get a good faith commitment for them that they will not attempt to attempt suicide. Right? And I get a commitment from you that you will not take your own life. Get them to make that commitment, and hopefully, inshallah, from there they will take the steps after that. So I want to stop here. I apologize again for the slideshow not working. But there's a lot more to say about this issue. I didn't talk about Islamic perspectives as it relates to this issue because of time. I felt the material is important. Of course, we have perspectives in our deen that are very important in this. And there is a time and place to maybe to share some of these things with people, because, like I said earlier, they will never think, life will get really bad, but they would never think about taking their life because this body is an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not my right to take what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. So for some people, that's enough of a barrier to not allow them to, go to the next step. But for others, it's not. And so, just like we try to use, the ulama, when they talk about the evidences that we have in trying to make people, when we have tried to encourage people to do what they should be doing as far as their practice as a Muslim, for example, to pray, we have what we call dalil naqli and dalil aqli, right? We have dalil naqli, which means whatever came to us, passed on to us from the Quran and Sunnah, right? So why do we pray? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. Why do we pray? إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا, and so on and so forth, right? These are the evidences. But then you also use dalil aqli. Why do you pray? Because if you pray, it's going to help you discipline your life. It's going to help you put your life in order. It's going to give you, you're not going to stay up till 3 in the morning every night and waste your life away because you have to wake up for Fajr in the morning, on and on, right? Those are like, you're giving them the reasons why, right? So with suicide, the same thing applies. For some people, you can give them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says this, right? وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't kill yourselves. وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى تَهْلُكَةٍ. Right? Don't throw yourself to ruin by your own hands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells you, those are direct evidences as to why suicide is not allowed. But for some people, that's not enough, right? And there needs to be other means by which we encourage them to take care of themselves and their lives and so forth. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. We hope that this was a benefit. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, please go ahead.
This kind of parents that know their child is suicidal, how much should they be, and maybe he's trying to get help, how much should they be intervening? Let's say they see him a particular day, it's very low, and he just wants to go out somewhere, and he's not telling anybody where he's going. So how much responsibility do parents have in
very good. Mufti Ibrahim is asking, how much responsibility do parents have over their child who they suspect or has the potential to take his own life? What should they do? Should they stop him, prevent him from going out? To what extent should they intervene, right? Number one, it would be good for those parents to get the consult of a mental health professional, right? To kind of help them, coach them along that path, right? What is the best way to intervene? So even if so ideally they get their child to a mental health professional. Look, we know that you're depressed. We know that you're failing school. We know that you feel there's no reason for living. We know that, and this happens in the community. They would say they were involved in a relationship, right? They had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and that person left them, and now they feel like the world is coming to an end, and all of these different things happen, right? They did something maybe they even did something that was wrong, right? And now they're depressed of that wrong, and so sometimes parents will beat up their child, say, well, you shouldn't have been in that haram relationship anyways. Well, of course they shouldn't. But what do you do with them now, right? How do you intervene now? And so it takes some finesse, and it takes some, it takes just a good listening ear. You listen to them without judgment, and understand what it is, what the pain that it is they're going through, without lecturing with them, without preaching to them, and all of these things, and try to get them to agree to get to a place where they'll get help. Right? That's what we're talking about today. Persuading them to get to a place where they'll get, the help that will actually benefit them, because oftentimes the communication, channels within the home are part of the problem, quite frankly. So, somebody else had their hand up? Any other questions?
What about self-destructive behavior and rebellious behavior?
Good question. Self-destructive behavior, talking about cutting.
That or even just like being reckless going outside, just drinking, smoking.
Yeah. So two things. Number one, this is really, really interesting. In the field of mental health, they say that, a lot of young people, they do something now, they cut themselves. People razor blade or some sort of sharp object, or even dull object sometimes, and cut their wrists, cut their arms, and it seems like a very scary thing, and it is. But this is really interesting. The mental health experts, they say if you see your child doing that, your teenage child or whoever it may be, doing that, don't prevent them from doing that. Don't prevent them from doing that. Find out what is going on underneath that. Find out why it is that they are engaging in that. The wisdom behind that is this. People who cut themselves, and we see this in the community with the youth. Unfortunately, it's there. The reason why they do that is because emotional pain, you cannot control it. You can't control depression. You're depressed. You don't want to be depressed. How do I stop myself from being depressed? How do you do that? But pain, physical pain, you can control it. I control this thing. Cutting myself right now, and there's a physical pain there, and the physical pain is gonna come, and that's gonna help me forget about the emotional pain, right? So don't focus on them stopping their physical pain, because it's an outlet for them to not have to deal with their emotional pain. The goal should be not forget about the physical pain, get to the bottom of the emotional pain, right? So that's one. As far as reckless behavior, drinking, smoking weed, just going out doing crazy stuff. Young guys will get these cars and they'll, drive them fast and do these things, right? Put their lives in jeopardy in various other ways. Those are signs of underlying distress, right? Underlying pain, underlying trauma, maybe. Unfortunately, I don't want to point out particular ethnic communities, but in some of the ethnic communities in the Muslim community, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma. They come from the countries they come from. They come as refugees. They had to escape and flee from their country, and there was a lot of pain in that. Their parents brought a lot of that pain with them. There was a lot of conflict in the household. They learned nothing but conflict in the household. And so they carry these things. There's no outlet for them at home. And so they find these other ways of seeking, escape, alcohol, drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Again, to get to the bottom of the emotional pain, to try to agree to get them to get help. It's difficult, it's difficult. The older kids get, the more difficult it gets, because the less authority that you have over them. The hardest people to work with in the community are adults who have mental health issues or substance abuse issues and who don't want the help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah doesn't change the condition of a people until they change their condition themselves. So people have to be willing and ready and have the intention, right? They have to have the intention to want to seek change and betterment. That's the first step. Unfortunately, when they don't have that themselves, it's very difficult to work with people like that until something really bad happens or something like that. Or their hearts are opened up by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayer is number one. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help is an extremely important part of that whole equation, but that is a challenging place. Anybody else? Yes, brother. So, can you hear me? I can. Oh, hold on.
Muslims medicine really to interfere with respect of So I see, from it,
You see what I'm saying?
some kids get off the track. Okay?
Some cases that are what I didn't hear.
Some kids
Off track. Some kids are off track.
off the track.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, get involved, drug,
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And we look at it, we know, we are right there on the spot, and we get a chance to write it down. Now, we also go from the state to birth from the state, whom the one whom we did, you have to accept, this is what so where is the 9%?
Exactly.
What we organize as a youth, each concept, really,
Yeah.
operate, and that keeps together to finish up the problem.
Barakallahu feekum. That's a very important question. What is the role of the Islamic Center in helping young people who are off track, as you described, or who are struggling in life, who are maybe struggling with alcohol, with drugs, who are engaging with the opposite sex and engaging in sometimes financially struggling. All of these various issues that people have in the community, not only young people. What is the role of the masjid? The role of the masjid is very central in all of this, right? The masjid is a place where Islam is taught, is preached, and is imparted to all segments of the community. And so the masjid should be a place where these things are talked about openly, right? We should not be afraid or ashamed of talking about. Today, for those brothers that came late, we're talking about suicide and suicide prevention. Some people say, well, talking about suicide, what do you mean? Suicide haram, why are you talking about that, right? No, we have to address. Islam came as a solution to world's problems. Islam is the solution for world's problems, social problems, environmental, economic, family, and so on and so forth. So the masjid should be a place where those things are openly talked about, openly discussed. The administration of a masjid should realize that they should enlist the help of professionals in various fields to address these. Programs should be had like this one tonight to address these things. That should be done with with the youth group. It should be done with the adults. There needs to be programs that address marriage, the institution of marriage and the preservation of marriage, right? So the masjid is a place where that preventative work should take place. Prevention means talking about it, preaching about it, teaching about it, and so forth. The next level of working through things is what we call intervention, right? When the problems are there, then you're involved in it and you deal with the problems actively. That takes another level of professional expertise, resource, and so on and so forth. You have organizations like the Khalil Center to partner with when it comes to mental health issues. You have other organizations that deal with other issues for people's financial problems, organizations like Uplift Charity. Or you have, we have, for example, many Muslims that are coming out of the prisons and they need help supporting them to get re-entered into society. You have organizations like Tayyiba Foundation. So that's where the masjid needs to partner. You have masjid when it comes to civil rights. You have CARE. That's their specialized, area where they work, and so on and so forth. So the masjid should be a place where these things are talked about, openly expressed, openly brought up, and then ideally a partnership made with the masjid with various organizations to help people in their different spheres of life, right? To do and to intervene and to have a role in helping people in their various struggles in life. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. I mean, the masjid in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it served all of those functions. People's financial issues were addressed. People's substance abuse issues were addressed. right? People's marital issues were addressed, and so on and so forth. So we have to, you know, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is our role model, and so we do have to build out our institutions. But that's the whole community's responsibility. It's not just the imam's responsibility, not just the board of directors' responsibility. It's all of the lay members, the community members. If they have ideas, if they things that they want to do, they should bring that to the masjid. If the masjid is hesitant to do those things, they should insist that these things are addressed, and so on and so forth. So everybody has their role. Allah. One last question. Isha is 9:15 or 9:30? Okay. Our brother in the back. Go ahead. Go ahead. Two questions. We'll take two questions, inshallah. It raise at the same time.
So I want to know the favorite verses or outside of the photography and people who actively toxic commit suicide versus the individual who isn't attempting suicide per se, but they put themselves in very high risk situations such as they work as a crash dummy or they ride vehicles in really high speeds with their driving motorcycles versus a person who just has their with your expertise and research on some cases where it's
Yeah, the one group that's actively attempting suicide is where there needs to be the most attention paid. People who have an active, what we call plan to commit suicide, they know when and where and how, right? They're going to take their life. The more they know about their plan, the absolute more that we are concerned that we intervene. And when somebody says, I am going to take my life, maybe we do or we don't know the time, and they're going to do it by this means, right? And they're insistent upon that. There is authorities that can get involved. People, there's what we call the psychological evaluation team will be sent out from the county. You can call them, they'll come out, they'll evaluate the person's psychological state. And if they feel that the person is a harm to themselves, then they will take them on what they call a 51-50 hold, 72-hour hold, where they will be involuntarily, it's not a hospitalization, but perhaps, I don't know what they exactly designated as, but they hold them in a hospital-like setting, a clinic setting, and they observe them for 72 hours until they can, hopefully get them stabilized, right? So that's where a person with people who are displaying that, there should be a tremendous amount of attention shown, if not getting authorities involved. As far as somebody else who's engaging in high-risk activities and so on, what to do with them, that person should be talked to. What are you doing? Where are you going? You're putting yourself in danger. What's going on? What's going on? You didn't used to do those things. Why are you behaving those ways? Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything that you want to talk about? Right? Are you struggling with something? Is something hurting inside? Do you feel pain? Maybe you know something about them because of such and such, right? So you want to open up that conversation to get them to the point where they realize, okay, yeah, maybe there is hope for me, there's place for me to get help. But the first category of people, those people need to be help. Last question. Sergio.
I would like to send three questions what you said. To get that consider the central role. How I see around our session. And apparently the program the new group. Is there any way of being anywhere to be given advice what we should do to bring the young kids into the mind. When they are teenagers, they make a high school student. When they are in the preschool or kindergarten, what we should do that those kids start coming in the mind and the environment. So when they become a teenager, then they will at least they will know their mom and respect their elders, all these things. So the problem is that when they are young, they don't come. And when they grow up, then all these problems happen very well. And when we see it,
Right. I agree with you. When they get to high school, and if we start making our efforts to recruit them at high school, by then it's oftentimes too late. Middle school is a very crucial time, right? And before that, of course. And I think everybody heard the question, what is the responsibility of the masjid, and how does the masjid attract young people to come to its programs, and so on and so forth. My number one kind of answer, and I'm not saying this, I'm not being funny by saying this, and I really mean this, and if there's anybody here who has influence and who cares about the community's youth and, really wants that issue to be solved or addressed. I don't know if solved is the right word, but at least to be addressed to another level. Hire a full-time youth director for the masjid. Hire a person who works full-time at the masjid, who knows how to work with young people, a young man in their 20s, who can relate to youth. The full-time director should not be an imam whose specialty is religious knowledge and understanding and so forth. They should have some understanding of how to work with youth. They should have some understanding of social media, how to leverage social media, how to connect with young people on these various platforms. The masjid should put forth resources for that. $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 at least should be their salary a year. It should be a one dedicated position for that in the masjid. Any Christian institution in America this size and with this number of membership will have at least four different, at the minimum, 4 different full-time ministers. And when the Christians, they call them ministers. So one will be the minister of adult education, one will be the minister, the youth minister, one will be the interfaith, and one will be for marital affairs. Right? They're all religiously trained, but they have their each sphere of the community they work in. In the Muslim community, we have to move away from this model in the big masjid. This is the biggest masjid in South Valley. In the big masjid, we have to move away from the model of one imam, one masjid, and that's it. There's no other staff, there's nobody else. The imam should not be the one who's setting up the table, who's setting up the projector, who's setting up the thing. There should be a janitor or the grounds person who's dealing with those things. There should be another individual who knows how to work with young people, who knows how to talk to them, who knows how to address them, who knows how to recruit them. And their sole purpose is for focusing on that. Until we put resources, until we put money where our mouth is in our community, we will not get the results that we need. It can't be done on pure volunteer basis. You can do something. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm not saying everybody should sit at home and say, oh no, until somebody is hired, khalas, we're not good. No, we should make efforts. But if you really want to address things and really want to be, effectively address these things in the community, then we have to put a financial resource to that. Otherwise, what is the issue? I mean, that's it. There's nothing else to that. So hope it's not too blunt of an answer, but that's my experience. I've been around. I've seen different models, and the communities that allocate a resource to actually, not on a 1 hour a week basis talking to the youth or calling them or simply putting out a flyer. We put out a flyer and nobody came. It takes a lot of work. to get young people to the masjid. Why would young kids want to come to a masjid when they can stay home, especially now, especially today with all of the amenities at home and video games and all this stuff? It takes tremendous work to get there. So it needs a full-time effort and full-time research. Allahu Ta'ala. So help our dear Mufti Sahib out, relieve some of the burdens from his shoulders, make sure that there are other people in the community who are going to have other responsibilities. The masjid has to put towards that research. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to take from the best of words and to benefit from them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which benefits us and to benefit from what we learn and to increase us in knowledge. Sallallahu alaihi
wasallam. He could have been spending with his family, but he chose to come here and spend it with us.